CSIS 2440 is filmed before a live studio audience.
So we're going to be building this palindrome site that I mentioned, right? First thing I want to talk about is what the heck is a palindrome? And why are we going to build a stupid palindrome site? You may have even done something with palindromes in other programming classes, okay? So who knows what a palindrome is? Let's start there.
Spell backwards.
Yeah, it's a word or phrase or sentence that's spelled the same forwards and backwards. For example, the word Bob, it's palindrome, B-O-B or B-O-B, right? What we're going to do is build a program that can tell if it's a palindrome. It's going to tell us a whole bunch of other stuff about the word, and eventually it's going to tie into a database and getting user input and a whole bunch of other stuff. But we're going to start very, very slow and small. The reason we're doing this, remember, what's PHP's job? It really has one job: make HTML. That's it. It makes HTML. That's it. Yeah, that's what it does. It makes HTML. So you could, if you wanted to use maybe, so forget about the fact that nowadays JavaScript can connect to a server and connect to a database. That didn't used to be a thing. So forget about that for a moment. Even without that component, you could build something in JavaScript and HTML that could tell if something's a palindrome or not, right? You can get user input in a web form, and you could take a web form, and in JavaScript you can reverse the word, take the input and reverse the word and see if it matches. You could do that in JavaScript. Totally could, okay? What we're doing here is we're going to decide all of this stuff on the server, and then we're going to deliver up just some raw HTML to the page, to the website, the web browser, okay? All right, enough background. Let's get some code going. First thing we're going to do is set up a project, and the way I have my thing set up here is you'll see this thing right here called dev. That takes me to all of my websites that I build for my own stuff. And then this one takes me to web pages we're going to build in this class. It's just a folder. So I'm going to open that up and note the file path. It's actually inside of htdocs, right? So we're going to create a brand new project here. We're going to call it Palindrome, right? The very first thing I do when I create a PHP project is I just put some cheap PHP in it, echo Bob. Then I save it and see if that generates Bob, or if it just shows me some plain text, right? So let's navigate to where that folder was, to the htdocs, inside of CSIS 2440, and inside of Palindrome, and we're going to just call this index.php because it's going to be the default file. All right, so there we go. Looks like the syntax highlighting is working. Let's go to our browser and localhost. That takes me to htdocs, CSIS 2440, takes me to that folder, and then Palindrome is the new one we just created, and it gives me Bob. That means PHP is working. It's processing. That's just the basics of making sure your code's working. We know as humans the word Bob is a palindrome, right? It spells forward and backwards the same, okay? If I want to figure out programmatically if it's a palindrome, what do I need to do? Let's think really high level for a minute, and I mean very high level. What do we need to test this out? Yeah, a function that will test it for us, right? What's going to be in the function, that's a whole different thing. Let's get to that in a minute. So what's a good name for a palindrome function that's going to return a true or false value? If it's true, it's a palindrome. If it's false, it's not.
Is something.
Yes. Is palindrome. Yeah, is palindrome or is whatever, because you're answering the question, is it a palindrome? Yes, true or false, right? Now this, you can do whatever you want. You can call this function Beavis. But standard convention is to call it is whatever. So we're going to create a function, and you just use the keyword function, is palindrome. That's it. What's going to go inside the curly braces is what's next. But whatever goes in there on line 7 and below, somewhere in our code, we're actually going to echo is palindrome, and we're going to pass in Bob to test if Bob's a palindrome. Easy enough. So this will return true or false, and this will echo out true or false. Not quite, but that's what we're going for, right? There's a little quirky issue we're going to deal with in a minute. But for now, does everybody get the idea, right? Okay. Next up, how do we reverse the word? So get this into your heads right now. There's a function for that. Just remember that. There is a function for that. Whatever it is, there's a function for that when it comes to string manipulation. And you just mentioned it is strrev, and you put the word in there and it will reverse it. Okay? So let's just comment this out for a minute, and let's just echo out STRREV Joe. No, Beavis. How did I forget? It's always Beavis. Let's just run that. It's going to echo out the word Beavis backwards, right? That's all it's going to do. So refresh, and we have a parse error. Nice. Anybody see? Yes, right there. Nice. So notice what it says here, unexpected curly brace. Whenever you see that, it's either literally you have too many curly braces or it's probably a missed semicolon, and that's what it looks like it was in this case. So there we go. That's Beavis backwards. Okay? Okay. So now we know what this string reverse function does. Let's put this all in action here and just reverse and test it. So we're passing in this value to right here. Okay? Now I know everybody in this room has Java experience, so you know how function parameters work, I think. However, this video is for posterity. So I want to just briefly talk about what happens here, okay? So remember back to your math days, right? You have a function like f of x is equal to 2x plus 1, right? That's the function definition, right? Does everybody recognize that from just your XY graphs in algebra? Okay, this is the function definition. That is that line of code right there, 5 through 8. That's the definition of the function. Then later your teacher or whatever says, what is f of 5, right? That's the function call. I'm calling the function and I'm passing in the value 5 to this variable called x, and then x gets put here and the math happens, right? So in this case we put a 5 here and we get 10 plus 1 is 11, so the y coordinate is 11. F of x is 11. That is exactly what we're doing here. We are defining a function here, and so we need to put the x there that's going to capture the thing that's passed in, right? That's not correct syntactically, but we'll fix that in a minute. And then we call the function where I'm passing in the 5, right? In this case, it's Bob. Make sense? And then we do something in here with whatever x is, right? All right, so I think we're good there. So what we put here, actually, you could put x. Remember, all PHP variables have a $ sign at the beginning of them. But in this case, we're going to use like the word phrase, right? Because we're going to test some phrase, okay? And right now it's Bob, but in a minute it's going to be bigger phrases, okay? So now the variable phrase is on line 2 is going to be assigned the value Bob. So here we go. Phrase now equals Bob. Okay. So now if I reverse phrase, I'll be reversing Bob. Dig it?
I dig Sugar Smash.
Okay, so now what I've done, I've created a new variable right here called reverse phrase, and I've assigned it whatever that's going to be, which at the moment is Bob, and Bob will be Bob. It's the same. But now the real thing, and for Java folks, this is going to hurt, okay, because you can't do this in Java. I want to ask this question. If rev phrase is equal to phrase, then I want to return true, okay? In Java, you have to, because strings are classes, you have to take the string and use the dot equals method, right? That's not a thing here, okay? Strings are just a data type in our world. All right, now an if statement, because you're in this class, you should have JavaScript experience because you should have taken 1430, and everybody in this room has got Java experience. You've done that before, right? If x equals 9 or whatever, that's all we're doing here. We're just comparing two variables, okay? All right, so if that's the case, then return true, else return false. There you go, that's our entire function. Now, we need some more components to make a real palindrome checker. All right, how do we feel about the basic idea here? We good? Yeah, okay. I'm going to say, let's go echo. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying the word, what is the word? It's Bob, but we're going to just leave it generic for a minute. This word is a palindrome, true or false. And it's going to tack onto the end of it something. Right now I've got you believing that it's going to tack on the word true or false, but it will not. But that's the idea, right? We'll get back to that. Okay. The word is a palindrome, true or false. I spelled of wrong or wrong there, but true or false. And it says 1. Okay. Let me fix that. And let's pass in a word that is not a palindrome. Just ob. And what do you expect it to show there? You would expect it to show 0, but nothing. Okay. Okay. So let's pause and talk about that for a minute. Before we do, though, conceptually, we feeling okay? This making some sense? It's pretty straightforward. Okay. In PHP and JavaScript, literally everything on the planet is true except for the number 0 and the word false. Everything else is true. Name anything. Cat is true. They're also evil, but it's true. Cat is true. Yeah, so I'll prove that to you. If cat, echo, they are evil. Okay, so if that thing that's in parentheses is true, then echo they are evil, right? They are evil. Now, if I said, how about this? If I said, if 0, echo they are evil. Well, 0 is false, so nothing. Also, the Boolean word false is also false, and nothing echoed. I just refreshed and nothing happened. Okay. Literally anything else, like the name a number, whatever. If that's true. That number is true. Everything, a negative number, positive number, everything but the number 0 and the word false will evaluate to true. Okay. It's also true in JavaScript. Yep, it's also true in JavaScript. So, how can I fix this to where I can display a proper message here? So I could just return the word true, right? So like if I did this, return true and return false, like the actual words, that's a string now, it's not a Boolean. And now I get a false there, and I'll get a true if I put the word Bob back in there. But I want this to be a Boolean return value. So I want it to be a Boolean value. So we can use our friend, the ternary operator. You guys remember that one? Ternary operator. This is what it looks like. Some condition, and what to print if it's true, echo this if true, and echo this if false. That's the syntax, right? So it looks like this, like that. That's the syntax. The thing on the left of the question mark is the condition. It's your if statement that you're checking to see if it's true. The thing to the right of the question mark is the value for the event that it's true, and the thing on the right of the colon is the value for the event that's false. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's just a form of an if statement. Not quite, okay? An if statement, it's if this, then do all these things, or don't do these things, or whatever. This is always grabbing some text. You're just generating text based on one of two conditions, okay? So, in our case, we want to generate the word true or the word false, depending on is palindrome Bob, or whatever word. So we're saying if this value is true, then I want to create the string called true, and if it's false, then create the string called false. So ternary operators are always used in the context of either echoing a string or assigning a string to a variable. That's it. It's just strings, okay? Or it could be numbers, right? But you're echoing it or putting it in a variable. That's it. You're not doing a whole bunch of operations like in an if statement in the curly braces. You could put a bunch of operations, but in a ternary, you're just generating one of two values. That's it, okay? So this is actually the code we need right here. And that goes right here. So what's happening here, I'm saying, let's scroll back a little bit. Echo, this word is a palindrome, true or false, and then in the event that it's true, it will echo the word true, or it'll echo false in the event that it's false. Refresh. And there we go, we got a true. And you can put whatever values you want there. Let's first change this so that it's going to give us a false, right? But it doesn't have to be the word true or false. I just made that up. I could say Beavis, or Beavos, that's his brother. And Butthead. And so now, in the event that it's false, it prints out Butthead. In the event that it's true, it'll print out Beavis, right? Does that make sense? Okay, but we're going to go with true and false, obviously. So there's a couple things we need to change here to make this a little bit more dynamic. And notice right now I haven't really done any HTML. Okay, I need to make some HTML because this is an HTML website. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But what's sort of one little issue here, if I want this to be a better program, passing Bob directly into that function is not really ideal, right? We should probably assign that to a variable. And eventually we want that variable to be input from the user, right? Like if you're in the Java world, on the console, they enter the word Bob, and then we'd run that. So we're not going to worry about the input part now, but for now, let's just create a variable that's called input, and we'll set it to Bob, right? And then eventually the user will be doing that instead of us. And we're going to pass in whatever they put in, inputs. That won't change anything. Everybody agree that won't change anything? Okay? All right. Next up, that's Bob. Well, what about, oh, I don't know, how about this palindrome? Race car. That's a palindrome. True palindrome analysis, you ignore spaces. This is going to say false, because if I truly spell it, just reverse it, it will be different, because the space will be in a different place. Does that make sense? So if we run it right now, we get false. If I take the space out, we'll get a true. We get a true. Okay. We want to leave the space in because that's how the user might write it, but we still want to account for it. Now, what I'm about to show you, another reason why I don't necessarily want you to copy the code, because what I'm about to show you is a really bad way to do this. Okay? Because it works when you're just trying to replace one thing, but we're also eventually going to need to replace any punctuation, question marks, exclamation points, everything. You want to use regular expression for that? We're going to have a whole lecture one day just on that. For now, we're going to do something different, because this function that we're about to look at is useful if you want to replace just one thing. Okay? If you want to replace multiple things, there's better choices out there. But what I want to do is just remove the space. And I want to remove it from rev, phrase, reverse, and phrase inside the function. I don't want to change the actual input. I want to change it inside the function. So what I can do, there's a function and it's called str_replace. Okay? str_replace, and it takes in 3 arguments. The first one is, this is not real code, but we call it the needle. The second one is the replacement value, and the third one is the haystack. You get the metaphor there? Right? So I'm looking for a needle. What am I looking for? I'm looking for spaces. What do I want to replace it with? Just nothing. What's the haystack? Phrase. I'm going to search through phrase for spaces and replace it with nothing. So the space goes bye-bye. Dig it?
Dig 'em.
Okay, so now I'm taking this function here and I'm saying take whatever phrase is, look through it for a space and replace that space with nothing. Whatever that ends up being, which will literally end up being, this whole thing becomes race car. It becomes that. It just takes the space out. That's all it does. So now I'm saying take that and assign it to this variable that we've been using, phrase. It's no different than when you say x equals x plus 1, right? Take whatever the x value is, add 1 to it, then reassign it to x. Well, I'm saying take whatever phrase is, take out the spaces, and then reassign it to phrase. So now phrase literally equals race car with no space, right? Now the next line, so this we'll just say removes spaces from phrase. Next line, we're saying just reverse it, reverse phrase and assign to variable. And then this last one here is just comparing the reversed one with the regular one and seeing if they're the same, right? The reversed one that has the spaces removed, right? So compare and return. And now we should get a true. Oh, I did that again. Sorry about that. So now we get a true, and if I put another letter in there, and we get a false. So, but the true now works because we've gotten rid of the space. Okay, so far so good? Now here's the part where I mentioned that regular expression is a better approach, but we're just going to use our string replace trick again. Okay, what if I had this one? Madam, well, we'll deal with that in a minute. Adam. Okay, I'm just going to change that to double quotes so I don't have to deal with that apostrophe there. Follow what I'm doing there? Right? Okay. Does everybody understand what I just did there? If I had single quotes here, it would think that that single quote there is trying to close off the string. So I just switched my quotes. Madam, I'm Adam. There's 2 things in there. Well, there's the spaces. That's one. Secondly, there's an apostrophe. Third, it's capitalized. Right? Remember, this is a case-sensitive language. Maybe. Wait till we get into case sensitivity. That's going to really mess you up. But for now, the string is case sensitive. Okay? So let's one step at a time. Let's ignore the apostrophe for just a minute Right now, that really is a palindrome. When I remove the spaces, it's the same forward and backwards, but it will give me a false because it's capitalized. Okay, that said false when I refreshed. So how can we handle that? There's a function for that, exactly right. And it is called, you're close. Yeah, it's called str to lower, right? Close enough. And so what we're going to do is say phrase, right? If I just simply say phrase equals str lower phrase, it's the same thing here. It's like the x equals x plus 1. I do something to x and then I reassign it to x, right? So here I'm saying take phrase and lowercase everything and then reassign it to phrase. So now it's lowercased, right? So we'll just say lowercase the phrase, okay? So now it's lowercase, and then I reverse the lowercase version that doesn't have any spaces in it, and then I compare them, right? Take a peek, and we get a true, okay? Let's throw that apostrophe back in there. False, because I haven't dealt with apostrophes. Well, we already know how to do that with just by simply something like that, right? That'll work. Look for the apostrophe, replace it with nothing. That will work, okay? And that gives us a true. But remember, we're going to eventually get rid of punctuation, so I'm going to need one for exclamation points, periods, commas, this. I mean, that's too many. For now, this is good. When we learn regular expression, we'll change this. What this is going to eventually be is a page that gives us a bunch of information about the phrase input by the user. How many words is it? How many letters is it? Or characters and a few other things, okay? So what I want to do here is, instead of saying the word is, we're going to say something like facts. So you can put the variable right in there if you're using double quotes. So if I just say right now facts about phrase, it says facts about Madam, I'm Adam, right? And I want that to be in quotes, so we could put this kind of quote around it. But I want double quotes. But I also want to leave double quotes on the outside. So what can I do about that? Escape characters. You guys should be familiar with that from Java and probably JavaScript. So the way escapes work, every character in Java, some characters in PHP, sorry, some characters in PHP have a job. Semicolon has a job. It's to terminate the end of a line of code. A double quote has a job. It's to wrap around strings, right? Single quote is to wrap around strings. Curly braces has a purpose. It's to block out code. Well, you can allow a character to be relieved of its duties of whatever it's supposed to do temporarily. And that's by using an escape character. So I'm going to put double quotes around the input. And at the moment, this is bad because it thinks that that quote right there is closing that. And then there's just this random thing sitting here and something's weird. So I'm going to use the backslash and say, dear double quote, I'm allowing you to escape your responsibilities and just be like a normal quote for the moment. That's what the escape character does. So now it's no longer doing its job of closing a string, it's just being treated like every other normal character. And we get that, okay? All right. You can, yeah, the question was, can you escape a backslash? And you absolutely can, yeah. It's backslash, backslash. Yeah, you're just escaping it, yeah. Exactly right, because the backslash has a job, it's to escape things. Well, you want to escape, you can, that's very recursive, very recursive, yeah. Okay, so now one of the things we're going to say here, this is actually going to be an H1. Now we're getting some HTML finally. Now we'll have a nice little bullet point here. Facts about Madam, I'm Adam, palindrome, true. Eventually I'll say false if it's a different word. What we're going to make here is a whole bunch of palindromes that can be input by the user, or potential palindromes, and they're just little blocks or cards or squares on the screen that just have some information about it, right? So we can quickly add one or two little things here. For example, I want to know how long it is. So we'll just say, there's a function for that. There's a function for that. But let's look at what we're trying to accomplish here. All I'm trying to do is that, or whatever the number is, right? That's all I'm trying to do. Well, I'm just going to replace that with, instead of me hard coding that number, which is ridiculous, right? We're going to replace that with a function that can figure it out for us. And so remember the little trick I showed you the other day. Whatever you want to be replaced with something dynamic, you're going to close the quote, put the dots, and then dot, and then close the quote, open the quote again. So it's quote, dot, dot, quote, right? And then in between the dots goes the function, or the whatever, that's the PHP part of it, the dynamic part. And so in this case, it is called strlen, string length, and we're passing it the word input. That's it. So now it's going to say number of characters. It'll be madam and the spaces and the hyphen everything, okay? 14. Exciting, right? This is all about string manipulation, right? This is everything. There's so many string manipulation functions. I'm going to quickly show you one more and then we'll be done, okay? And this one is going to be number of words, and it's actually called str word count. That's it. And that'll give me the number of words, 3. Okay? Now, this is a silly, useless website. Overall, it really is. But it's going to show you, expose you to a bunch of functions that are string manipulating functions. And why do we manipulate strings in PHP? You're on the right track, so we're not hard coding.
Yeah, for inputs could vary in format.
Well, so inputs would be strings for sure. Also, yep, so we can manipulate user input to make it uppercase, lowercase, or make things easier to check. But also because HTML is just strings, just text. And what are we doing? I'm manipulating look at lines 3 through 8. I'm manipulating HTML, H1 tags and things like that, right? That's all HTML. So you've really got to know all the different string manipulation functions in PHP. So we've looked at a few of them. They're also in the lecture notes. But these are all the ones I wanted to get to today. And then we're going to look at some more in the future. But the site will also teach us, besides string manipulation, eventually how to take user input and do something with it. Right? We didn't really learn that in 1430. We did a little teeny bit maybe in one or two of the programs we wrote, but for the most part, we didn't process anything. If you did the pizza website assignment, you used a PHP form that I created that it processed it for you. It took the input from your HTML and did something with it. We're going to learn how to make that PHP side of things, to make the pizza contact form. We're not going to make that one specifically, but we'll learn how to process that in PHP. Eventually, we're going to take in the input from the user, and then eventually we're going to connect this to a database and store their input in a database, and we're going to be able to loop through the database and display all the palindromes that have ever been entered into our site. Okay? So it's all these baby steps that teach us these different concepts and ideas as we go along. All right? Any questions about anything we looked at today?